When Cash Patel tried to belittle Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett during a nationally televised hearing, he expected silence, maybe even submission. What he didn't expect was one sentence that would leave the entire room speechless, and his credibility in pieces. The tension in the House Oversight Committee hearing room was thick enough to weigh on everyone's shoulders. The kind of tension that made people sit a little straighter, breathe a little slower, and forget, just for a second, that they were being watched by millions. It wasn't just another day on Capitol Hill. The stakes were higher. The eyes were sharper. And at the center of it all sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, composed, prepared, and absolutely still. She wore a deep plum blazer, not flashy but commanding. Her pen rested between her fingers, untouched for several minutes. She had been listening quietly, with the kind of stillness that wasn't passive but intentional. Her expression betrayed nothing. No irritation. No smugness. Just focus. Across from her, seated in a position of practiced ease, was Kash Patel, former Chief of Staff at the Department of Defense, former Senior Advisor to the National Security Council, a man whose resume was built on national security briefings, classified documents, and power corridors few civilians would ever see. He adjusted his red tie, leaned toward the microphone, and smirked. "With all due respect, Congresswoman," he began, his tone laced with condescension, "you're new to Washington. You don't understand how national security works." Some of his Republican allies nodded. A few even chuckled under their breath. The moment felt rehearsed, almost too easy. Patel had used this strategy before. Discredit the questioner before the question even lands. It was a playbook move. Paint the opponent as inexperienced, then declare yourself the adult in the room. It had worked on others. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't others. She raised her eyes to meet his, slowly, like someone taking a deliberate breath before delivering a closing argument in court. No flinch. No anger. Just an almost surgical awareness of the moment. Patel went on. "I've served at the highest levels of government while you were still figuring out how Congress operates," he said, waving a dismissive hand. The room fell awkwardly silent. A few reporters stopped typing. Some staffers glanced at each other. Patel was drawing a line in the sand, not between political parties, but between who he believed was worthy of asking questions and who wasn't. Crockett still didn't speak. She didn't interrupt. She let the silence do its work. To the untrained eye, it may have seemed like she was caught off guard. But those who knew her, colleagues, staff, and especially courtroom veterans, recognized the signs. This wasn't hesitation. It was calculation, the kind that precedes precision. Journalists in the press gallery leaned forward. A veteran legal analyst from MSNBC would later say, "I knew something was about to go down the moment she placed her pen on the table." The committee chairman glanced between the two, his finger hovering near the mic button, unsure if he should intervene. But before he could say a word, Crockett made the slightest movement, lifting her hand just a few inches off the table. A signal. A message. "I've got this." C-SPAN cameras zoomed in. The shot would later become the thumbnail for countless viral videos. Crockett seated in stillness, eyes locked on Patel, as the nation waited. In that moment, the hearing room wasn't about politics. It wasn't about party lines or sound bites. It was about something much older and much simpler. Power meeting preparation, ego meeting experience, and rhetoric meeting reality. Jasmine Crockett didn't need to raise her voice. She had something better, facts, clarity, and the quiet confidence of someone who had been underestimated too many times and had learned exactly how to use that to her advantage. What she said next wouldn't just shift the room. It would echo across newsrooms, law schools, and living rooms across the country. And it hadn't even started yet. "Mr. Patel," Crockett began, her voice calm, measured, and firm. "Before I was elected to Congress, I spent over 15 years as a trial attorney. I've cross-examined hundreds of witnesses, and I've heard every kind of excuse you can imagine." Patel shifted slightly in his seat. The smirk didn't leave his face, but something behind his eyes flickered, a recognition that this wasn't going to be a routine exchange. "I'd like to talk about your statements regarding the handling of classified documents," Crockett continued. "Specifically, a Fox News interview you gave on September 12th, where you claimed that certain documents were, quote, properly declassified through the appropriate channels. Do you still stand by that statement?" "I do," Patel answered confidently. "Everything was done by the book. I was personally involved in the process." Crockett nodded. "That's interesting because during your sworn deposition last year, When asked whether you had direct knowledge of any declassification procedures, you said, and I quote, "I was not personally involved in any formal process and cannot confirm if any such process occurred." A visible shift passed through the room. Reporters looked up from their notes. One of the Republican members stiffened in their seat. Crockett was holding up the transcript like a courtroom exhibit. Patel cleared his throat. Those were different contexts. That deposition was under different questioning, and... So the truth changes based on context. Crockett interrupted smoothly. That's a remarkable legal theory, Mr. Patel. Laughter, quiet but present, rippled through the hearing room. Even the chairman had to hide a smirk. Patel leaned forward. Congresswoman, I don't appreciate your tone. These are national security matters, and frankly, your questioning is more theater than substance. Crockett's eyes narrowed slightly, but her posture remained relaxed. I don't need theatrics, Mr. Patel. I need answers. The American people deserve clarity, especially when it involves documents that could endanger lives. Then she turned to a new document. On June 3, 2022, you signed a certification stating that all classified materials had been returned. That was false. Do you dispute that fact? Patel's jaw tightened. We believed at the time that everything had been returned. But you didn't verify it, Crockett said. You signed a legal certification based on belief, not confirmation. That's not how accountability works. She wasn't raising her voice. She didn't need to. Each word was delivered with surgical precision, slicing through the bravado Patel had entered the room with. Trying to regain control, Patel pivoted. Look, I served in the Department of Defense. I worked alongside intelligence professionals. You've been here how long? Barely a year. Experience doesn't negate the truth, Crockett replied. And if I've only been here a year, then it took me less than 12 months to uncover what you couldn't, or wouldn't, explain in your sworn testimony. The air in the room was electric now. Viewers watching live leaned closer to their screens. On social media, the clip was already being clipped and shared in real time. Crockett leaned forward. Mr. Patel, when someone makes two opposing statements under oath and on live television, that's not a matter of spin. That's a matter of perjury. And I'd advise you, very carefully, before you double down on either one. Patel didn't respond. For the first time in the hearing, he had no comeback. No deflection. No attack. Just silence. And Crockett let it hang. The silence in the hearing room stretched for several seconds. It wasn't just awkward, it was seismic. Patel's earlier arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a tight jaw and clenched fists. The cameras zoomed in, catching the ripple of unease on his face. Everyone watching, whether in the room or online, knew it. Jasmine Crockett had just landed a blow that couldn't be spun away. The chairman cleared his throat, attempting to bring the hearing back on track, but it was already too late. The moment had imprinted itself on the session. For the rest of the hearing, Patel's answers were shorter. More cautious. He looked down at his notes more often. Gone was the overconfident official who had dismissed Crockett as inexperienced. In his place sat a man suddenly aware he'd underestimated the wrong opponent. Crockett, meanwhile, remained calm and focused. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply returned to her seat, opened her folder, and began reviewing the next section of questioning, like a surgeon preparing for the next incision. That, perhaps, was the most powerful image of the entire day. By the end of the hearing, Patel had contradicted himself multiple times. Legal analysts began to murmur about the possibility of perjury referrals. Journalists flooded Twitter and YouTube with headlines like, Jasmine Crockett silences national security insider with one sentence. Freshman rep turns the tables in viral oversight showdown. News clips played her statement on repeat. I may be new to Congress, but I've spent enough time in courtrooms to recognize perjury when I see it. It hit like a gavel, clear, simple, and devastating. Outside the chamber, reporters rushed to catch Crockett for a soundbite. She stopped briefly, looked into the cameras, and said only this. Truth doesn't need theatrics. It just needs to be said plainly and backed with facts. She walked away with grace. Patel, on the other hand, exited through a side door and skipped his scheduled interview with a conservative news outlet. In the days that followed, the hearing moment went viral. Millions watched it unfold on social media. Law professors played it for their students. Debate coaches cited it in lessons. And ordinary Americans, people who'd never heard of Jasmine Crockett before, found themselves replaying that sentence over and over again. Because it wasn't just a political moment. It was a cultural one. In a world full of shouting matches, Crockett didn't shout. In a room full of posturing, she didn't posture. She calmly held up the truth and let it speak for itself. And it did, loudly, clearly, and with consequences.